Welcome to Q&A with Qlik. Today's session is new to Qlik Cloud. Our next session will be Tuesday, February 27th, and that's going to be Qlik Replicate Best Practices. Just want to introduce myself. My name's Troy Rainey. I largely work putting together webinars and videos like this one. And we've got an expert panel for you. I'll just take it around. Everybody just quickly introduce themselves. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you. I'm with Qlik Support. I've been here for about 2 years.
Awesome. And Frank?
Hi, this is Frank Savino. I've been with Qlik for a combined service of 10 years now, just over, and looking forward to your questions today.
Congratulations on hitting that milestone. That's big. And Vinay?
Thank you, Troy. Hello, everyone. I am Vinay, and I've been with Qlik for almost 4 years now, and I work with SaaS customers.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Our first question, is it recommended to have one tenant for data modeling and reloads and another tenant for visualization and analytics? Anybody want to address that?
Yeah, I think what the purpose of that is just, is to have, the similar environment to on-premise where you're doing your testing in one place and your production activities in another, simply keeping the two, it's basically emulating your on-premise environment. If you had on-premise environment, if you're using SaaS entirely and have not had an on-premise, it's just a typical standard industry best practice to do these kinds of methods, test and prod. I mean, that's just something normal.
But I wouldn't say
a
separate tenant is necessary. Would you recommend using separate spaces?
That's just one way. Sure, you can also use separate spaces as well. Absolutely, it's certainly one way to do it for sure.
Okay.
The great thing about cloud too is that it automatically scales workloads for enterprise customers even. So you can consolidate all of your data and analytics solutions in one hub basically. So you do have the option for one tenant to combine both of those functionalities.
Mm-hmm.
Great. All right, I'll move on to the next one. How can we see the sheet owner for public sheets in Qlik Cloud like it is for client-managed Qlik Sense? Vinay, did you want to take that one?
Yeah, so for the public sheets, it's not possible to find out like who is the actual owner, but whoever is going to make that sheet private is going to be owner of that public sheet. So basically what has to be taken into account is that only users with selected roles can make the sheets public and private. So you can find out like who has the access to make the sheets public and private and create the private sheets.
And what's the permission level that's required to be able to make a sheet public?
Yeah, it depends upon the type of licenses the user has, and it also depends upon if it's a shared or a managed space. Let me share that help site link where we have those clarifications done.
Oh, great.
And if you run into trouble, make sure your entitlements, whether you're capacity-based or subscription-based, have can view when you add users to a space or to an app.
Can view, that's good. All right. Well, I'll share that link. I'll move on to the next question. What is your approach for hybrid cloud environments to enable Qlik Cloud to leverage existing AWS, FSx, or Azure file shares used by Qlik Sense Enterprise on Windows? What I have seen, the storage connectors only connect to EBS or S3, not the actual managed file shares. So talking about hybrid environments and cloud storage.
I think so. Basically, your data is coming from a file in a file share somewhere, and you want.
It sounds like, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's data transfer. and I don't believe Data Gateway can handle that at the moment, but that feature is coming. I understand from talking to the developers in the Data Gateway. I'm not sure if it's first or second half of 2024, but data transfer certainly does do file transfer from network locations, and not a map drive either. It needs to be a shared network location via data transfer. I don't know if that answers your question, but those are a couple of options for data connections.
Okay, great. I'm just sharing a link to Vinay found, and I'll posted these in the chat. And I'll post these links along the recording later this week as well to the documentation about managing permissions in managed spaces and in shared spaces. Thank you for that, Vinay. Next question. Can the connection to files in shared folder be created using Qlik Data Transfer? It's very much on topic. Let's address that one first. So
Can connections to files in a shared folder be? Yeah. I mean, I think that's pretty much what I was just
exactly what you were saying,
commenting
right?
on, right? So
Right.
now keep in mind there is a limit. So I'm glad that question got asked, because we're seeing a lot of, well, not a lot, but some customers are starting to call in and with transfer errors, and the reason, excuse me, the reason we're getting transfer errors is there's actually a limit of 200 tables or files with Qlik Data Transfer. So you've got to mind the number of files you're actually transferring from a on-premise source. So
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's as well. It's actually written as a limitation in the documentation.
Okay. And I'll read the follow-up. What is the recommended way for sharing the apps? Use shared space for collaborators working on the same app, and use managed space for users who view the apps?
That's basically correct. Yeah.
Great. And a third follow-up to that one. Can the QED files be stored into folder hierarchy in Qlik Sense Cloud?
Currently, there is no folder hierarchy in Qlik Sense Cloud. It is just a space where you can store your data, but there is no hierarchy or a file structure in Qlik Cloud.
Because you use the user roles to kind of control access to those, right?
Yeah, and the same way where you can manage the files like folders within folders, that is not currently possible in Qlik Cloud.
Okay, thank you. What function has the SAP connector in Qlik Sense SaaS in Qlik Cloud?
I would say, what is the context for that question?
Yeah, I can say that I know when you're creating connections in the cloud, there are some SAP connectors there. And I recently did a Techspert talk all about Data Gateway, and we had a question come up about SAP HANA, and that was listed, but when it came to on-prem, there wasn't a connector through the Data Gateway, but there was an option recently available with the ODBC connector to connect to SAP HANA on-prem.
Using the generic ODBC connector. Yeah,
exactly. So yeah, we could use a little more context for that, but as far as I know, it is possible. I'll move on to the next question. Question about the subscription feature in cloud. This is very useful and exciting feature. However, this doesn't seem to work for third-party extensions such as VizLib. Is there a way to enable that? We have a lot of third-party extensions because of the look and feel of those. Thanks. Yeah, that's a good question. It comes up every now and then about third-party extensions, specifically VizLib. Does anybody have any insight?
Yeah, it's not possible to enable to export those data due to security security rules or the governance of Qlik Cloud. But I can say that it's underway and they are currently working to build that option. But I don't have an ETA or anything. But I do remember seeing ideation, and that's being currently under process. So it should be there should be an update on the ideation
Great. And just mentioning ideation, I wanted to bring it up for everybody. This is a page on Qlik Community, if you haven't seen it, where users and customers like yourselves can submit ideas and kind of upvote ideas for feature improvements, feature requests, and product improvements. So you can find what other people have already submitted and vote them up and kind of motivate product management to start incorporating your ideas into the product. So this is a section on Qlik Community. It's a good idea to keep an eye on, and I'll include the link to this in the chat. And I don't know if these links are clickable in the chat, but you can always copy them. All right, next question. All right, moving on to the next question. For marketing teams trying to corral analytics from multiple content platforms like Facebook, YouTube, etc., what is your philosophy or best practice approach for how to create visualizations that connect the dots between the different platforms, i.e., what type of visualizations are best for overall brand engagement dashboard featuring multiple channels? Well, that's a good question. When it comes to app design, I always lean on our design blog in Qlik Community. Patrick Nordstrom, he's one that we featured in a few Techspert talks and even a Q&A with Qlik once, and he's really good at trying to solve these use case problems when it comes to visualizations, and I'm sure he has some good ideas. Unfortunately, he's not on the call with us today, but I can provide a link to the design blog for you to check it out, and he's always out there. But if you're not finding what you're looking for specifically, we also have a forum on Qlik Community. Let me see if I can find that. Here we go. This is our Qlik Community main page, and here you can see forums and I guess it would be app development. There's also integration, extensions, APIs. We had a related question, but there is a design blog on here, and I'll try and find the link. I don't think it's right at the top. Oh, it is. Design blog is a great blog when it comes to keeping track on visualization capabilities and giving ideas for things like that. All right, moving on to the next question. Can we provide access to individual users within the company and external users from outside clients? That's a good question.
I think the big consideration there is the IdP that's being in use, right? Because we can only have one active IdP. So as long as those users from different locations can use the same IdP authentication, then it should work.
Right. So it's all about deciding what sort of IdP to use, and if your internal IdP can allow access to external users, then Qlik Cloud can. Is this connector comparable to the SAP connector, which a customer can purchase on the normal on-prem way? I guess you're talking about the SAP connectors that are available in Qlik Cloud.
There are differences between cloud connectors and on-prem connectors quite often. So I would take that case by case, basically.
Yeah. So it depends. So there are capabilities out there, but yeah, it's hard to say definitively one way or the other.
It would also depend where the data source is too, right? There's more there's more available web connectors, right, for cloud data sources, for example, that are available to Qlik Cloud. So yeah. So capabilities can vary depending on where the data is coming from.
Great. And if you are connecting to an on-prem SAP database, there is a connector for that. And if it's not specific, there have been some testing, like I mentioned with SAP HANA, that it will work through the ODBC generic connector.
Yeah.
But not all those sources have been tested fully, but that one has.
Yeah. I recently saw an example of it was SAP HANA S2, I think it is, or S3.
Okay.
So if that was on the cloud, if the data source was actually hosted in SAP SaaS, that's something that's still in development. But if you had an internal SAP HANA source in your own environment and you're using Qlik Cloud, that could be accessed using um, data integration and a gateway. So yeah, it really depends on the scenario.
Is Qlik Cloud capable of performing all the functions that Qlik Imprinting can? Specifically, can it generate extensive Excel reports containing multiple sheets? Frank, I saw you addressing that. Can you speak to that one?
Yeah, so I started to write an answer. I don't know if it actually went in there or not, but no, it's not one-to-one at the moment. Qlik Tabular Reporting. So there's Qlik Reporting Service, which basically encompasses tabular reporting, which is the closest experience to imprinting that you'll find in Qlik Cloud. It is not imprinting. Let me be clear about that. It is a separate entity in and of itself, but it does look a lot like imprinting. It has a lot of the same similar features. Now, keep in mind that tabular reporting does not encompass PowerPoint reports or HTML, all the other items that you'll see in imprinting at the moment. But it is building out, and there is a community forum, and I've posted that link in the forum. Oh, and Troy posted it in there as well.
Yeah.
To get your latest updates on tabular reporting and the other reporting services um, like automation reporting services and those types of things. So keep an eye on that forum for updates. And one of the things that's not available right now in tabular reporting is cycles. So not all the features are there yet. It is quite new. Came out in December, so bear with us while we build that out for you. But there's a lot of cool features in there right now that are available. PowerPoint and, like I said, PowerPoint, HTML, and other output formats may not be there yet, but it's nice to see the familiarity. I can tell you personally, because you probably all know that I worked with imprinting for the last 10 years. So it's nice to see that familiarity of imprinting in the cloud. Not imprinting, but similar to. So bear with us while we get those similarities back over time.
Yeah, and I was involved in helping make a video for some of this capability. So that I
Yeah,
just wanted to kind of highlight that it is pretty cool that there's a Qlik plugin or add-in, as it's called, in
that's
Excel
right.
to help you bring in Qlik objects from your cloud analytics apps into Excel once you create that connection. It's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Next question. While granting access, can we send invitation emails from the QMC?
You can't access send an invitation if the user hasn't actually authenticated to Qlik Cloud yet. So if you are still sending an invitation, you can't alert the new user that you have sent him in, you have granted access to particular apps. You can only grant access to the apps who are currently authenticated to Qlik.
But
So basically,
you can send them invitations to the tenant, right?
yeah,
I mean, you're adding a user but they need to
yeah,
log in first with that invitation before they can get access to apps.
yes, correct.
Okay.
So if you are using an IdP and if you want users to access, as soon as they log in, what you can do is if you have like Azure or any Okta or some IdPs, you can add those groups to the space membership so that if users log in, they can all know, since they are part of that, IdP groups, they can already access the spaces and the apps inside those spaces according to the level of roles they have.
Great. Thank you. All right. I see a couple questions sneaking into the chat. Let me see if scroll up and find that. All right. Is there an ETA when multiple IdPs will be supported?
Simultaneously, I assume.
Yeah. Yeah. just to clarify, you can have multiple IdPs, but only one can be active at a time. So you can kind of set it up, but yeah, only one at a time, as far as I understand. Anyone want to address any plans for that to change?
I would, that's product management. I believe they're talking about it in the shadows or what have you. But we're not aware of it. Guys, may correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we're aware of any timeline in H1 or H2 for second half of 2024 at least. But put your idea in the ideation. The ideation links are in the chat. So
yeah. So
yeah, the idea is open, and it's been open for quite a while now, and there has
it's
been
on there,
some
huh?
yeah.
All right, my eyes can't focus on all that small text, but it's in there. So just give it an upvote. All right, moving on to the next question. If you're using an IdP like Azure, you lose the ability to invite users to the tenant. Once they have access via IdP, then you can grant. I guess that's what we're talking about before.
Yes. So if you have an third-party IdPs like Azure, you won't be able to invite the users. You have to just give them a tenant URL and they can access the tenant. And with regards to the granting access to the apps, you'll have to invite them or add via the groups, or you have to wait until the users actually log into the tenant to add them to the space membership.
Okay. And how would that work if the user is a part of a group but hasn't logged into the tenant yet, and you grant access for a space with apps to a group? Would they be able to get access once they log in?
Yeah, so basically if you have a group, and Qlik Cloud can only recognize those groups until one of the members of that group can log into the tenant. So basically if it's a group of 10 people, at least one of those members should be logged into the Qlik Cloud tenant, and then those spaces will show up, and when you assign the space membership for groups, and everybody else, rest of the people, as soon as they log in, they'll have the access to those spaces.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you. Moving on to the next question. Is it possible yet to import private sheets and private bookmarks in cloud, assuming the same IdP is used for both? I'm assuming both means on-prem and cloud. So importing private sheets and private bookmarks from on-prem to cloud? Yeah. I see Vinay shaking your head.
No, it's not possible. It has to be a public one, because even if the IdP is same, the user ID should be matching, and in most of the cases they differ even if you have the same IdP. So it's a quite complicated configuration which you have to do. Make sure that even the user IDs are matching in on-premise and Qlik Cloud. And if any of the steps are mismatching, then you will lose those data. So it's better to make it public and then export it.
When the working copy in personal/hybrid space is updated and republished to the managed space, the refreshed data or newly added visualizations do not show up immediately in the published app in the managed space, unless the published app is refreshed. Is that correct? Sounds like someone's having some issue publishing.
It's cached pages, right? So maybe it's just a matter of
refreshing the web browser, the session.
Yeah, in some cases, I mean, it's still a web browser, right? In some cases, you might just be looking at cached pages on your web browser if you don't clear your browser often enough. Maybe it's as simple as that. I don't know, guys. What do you think?
I guess it also depends upon like how you are published. Like if you are published with data, or you also have the option to publish without the data. So when you click on publish and try to republish on an existing app, it gives you an option to include the data as well. So by default, if you include, the app is basically like a reloaded app, and you should be able to see the changes which is there in the shared space or your personal space app.
Yep. Perfect.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
Great. Okay, next question. Is there a way for subscription to deliver Excel format other than PDF and PowerPoint?
So
Most
native
possible
native
via.
Excel? Yeah, I don't think so.
Sorry, is that for subscriptions to sheets and charts? Do we think?
Or is it more like exporting to Excel?
Yeah, because a
Yeah.
subscription just uses
Oh,
images, basically, right?
Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
yeah.
Unless you're, yeah, I don't know if tabular reporting can do anything. We'll
Well,
get
I
that
think
functionality someday.
it. I mean, that question could either be very specific or broad. Like, are we talking about when you're
Yeah.
downloading data? Because there's the download is shows in Excel, and then there's a PDF when you're downloading data from a chart. Or, I mean, it
Well,
kind of.
subscription was capitalized, so I guess they know what they're talking about when it comes to subscription. And like you said, Andrew, that's images, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what you can do is if you are looking to just export the tables data, you can utilize the Qlik app automation, which gives you an option to export the straight tables, and then you can just export it to whichever the connectors or online data connections which you have.
Great.
Yeah,
Thanks.
good point.
Okay, I'll move on to the next question. Using the API, I can see that I can create groups. Is it possible to manage or add users to those groups that are coming in from an IdP? He's using Azure, not the Qlik built-in one. I want to emulate custom properties in cloud for local access management. So asking if you can manage and add users to those groups in Azure to emulate custom properties.
I would say we have the option to configure the groups, but I have not really worked on that much. But from what I can say, you should be able to add, members to those, groups, considering if you have the Azure configured properly. Because when you configure the groups using the CLI or, REST API, which is for creating groups, you can't edit those from the UI. You have to manage those users within those platform itself.
Here's
It
here
should be
correctly.
possible to add the users to the groups, if you have configured Azure, and if it is fetching the groups from the Azure, you should be able to configure those groups.
Great. All right. Thank you. All right, next question. Is the new reporting tool in Qlik Cloud, previously in printing, fully functional? So it sounds like there's a little bit of misunderstanding there, but there is a lot of reporting capability in Qlik Cloud. Frank, do you want to talk about that like some more?
Sorry, I was actually typing another answer. Sorry, what was the question while I multitask that one?
Is the new reporting tool in Qlik Cloud fully functional? Sounds
Yeah,
like it's
that's the same answer as before. Um, it is fully functional in the sense that it is a new product, but new features are being answered or are addressed all the time. So if you're looking for the full functionality of printing, it's not 100% there yet. And it may never be identical, but there are a lot of and it's still early days. It's only been around for 1 month, the tabular reporting. So there's a lot of cool features in there that look like imprinting, but it's not 100% there. Like you cannot do cycles yet. So again, if you could follow the tabular reporting forum to get more information and ask questions there directly to product management, then I mean that's what I would suggest, to keep an eye on the news for new features and updates.
And here is that reporting service forum that Frank mentioned earlier. Again, I'll post the link along with the recording, so you'll be able to get access to that. All right, next question is a bit of a follow-up from our previous one. In the situation where the internal IdP does not support it, how can I grant access to individual external users? Yeah, tough one.
What I would suggest is you have the option to opt for multi-tenant option, where if you want to have a separate tenant for external users and you want to have a separate for internal users, that would be an alternate option right now, because currently you can't use two IdPs on the same tenant. So you can use one tenant for Azure and second tenant for Okta. You can have configured like that and grant users to the accesses.
Great, thank you. Okay, next question about monitoring apps. Is there a monitoring app that we can use to know how much data files we're using on the Qlik Cloud SaaS tenant? My question is because I want to change my SaaS plan to capacity-based.
Actually, the reload analyzer will give you some of that information. It'll tell you what the data usage is for data connections and the files that are used. So, and I'll give
That
you a
was
link
the
for
reload analyzer, right?
Yeah, it should give some insight into that because it gives you the what data files you're actually using for the reloads, right? So I've got a link here for all of the monitoring tools for SaaS.
That would be
Very
fantastic.
handy, I think.
Thank you. I'll share that once I get it. And next question. As a tenant admin, I can't see the option to invite the new users to send an invite to sign up. Does anybody have a tenant available where we might be able to see that?
Okay. So,
All right, so we're looking at your tenant.
yep.
And where would we go to invite a new user?
Let me move some of this stuff away here. So if we go to the management console and go to users, and sorry, that's the home link, and we go to the invite option here. So again, management console, you log into your tenant, switch to your management console button here, and you have to be you must be a tenant admin to do this. Okay. So if you have the management console, switch over to the management console, and let's
Users and
click the invite. Yeah.
Yeah, if that button, invite button, is not there, means you have a IdP configured and users should be logging in via the IdPs to the tenant.
Great, thank you for demoing that.
Sure.
All right, next question is referencing a help site on managing apps that we shared earlier. Let's see. The above page, and let's see if I can find my option to share again. Share screen. Talking about this one, the above page shows this limitation of managed space. You cannot change the data model of a published app in a managed space. Could you provide some
that's working as
clarification on this
designed.
limitation? Yeah, just clarify it. Can the data model be changed when an app is republished to the managed space? For example, the association or joins between the tables? I think they're just looking for some clarification on what that means.
The managed space is a governed space. It's basically a view, typically, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, it's a view-only kind of space for consumption of end users. Whereas like shared space, you can make changes to the data model and et cetera.
Yeah, so it basically means the app is as it is, and no one can change it once it's out there. They can
Right.
interact with the data and make selections and narrow what they're looking at, but they no
Right.
longer have the rights to edit the architecture of that app.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you want to make
Basically,
changes, go for it.
I was just thinking the basic idea is shared space is often used for development, and the managed space is often used for the end users of the app. Yeah.
Consumption, correct.
Right.
Great, very clear. Thank you, guys. So that's all that means. So if someone opens up an app in a managed space, they won't be able to edit the script. All right, moving on to the next question. Is there a better way to create subfolders into shared spaces in order to organize better the QBDs? So asking for some
I don't think
data
so.
management tips.
I think B&A
Uh,
covered that a little earlier. Yeah.
I
yeah,
thought I
there's
saw
no file
something
structure.
for that, but it's not out yet. Yeah.
It's currently not possible.
The
Yeah.
hierarchies, yeah.
Yeah, you can't create subfolders. It is just a space where you dump all your QDs.
Okay. But you can, of course, create multiple. It's all about how you want to organize them, I suppose, and not as
Yeah.
not the same method that you might use in Windows. But all right, moving on to the next question. Someone was addressing a follow-up to that subscription question we were talking about. Yes, subscription to charts or sheets. And see if I can find the original.
Yeah. So that's the simple subscription where you're actually getting a report, which is basically a generated image. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, next question. Is there a limitation to the Qlik storage that exists within a space, like max number of files or space consumed? What reason would you give a client to save their data elsewhere? That's a good question.
Well, the limitation you're going to run into is the app size, right?
Yeah.
For reloads, especially. So that, of course, depends on your licensing and what capacity you have.
But there are a lot of options for larger.
There are, yeah.
Yeah, so even if you do have a some large apps, I can't remember, but I feel like it's in increments of like 25 gigs or something like that.
Oh, 20, I think.
Yeah, you get, if you're looking to purchase additional, it's like 20 GB, 40 GB, and additional, like, it's like
Okay, so it's in
20
20
star.
gigabyte increments. It just
Yeah,
keeps moving up to the next level.
yeah. And you can
So
get up to 100 GB. And with regards to the storage, you can like have any number of files. There are no restrictions. However, there might be a restriction on number of spaces you can create depending upon the license you have.
okay.
And
There we go.
for the Qlik storage, you can have, if you are using an enterprise license, you can have like unlimited storage. There are no restriction on how many data files or anything you can store. However, if you are using a basic Qlik Sense business version, you have a storage limit of 250 GB.
Sure, sure. But I feel like if
Uh,
you're running into any limitations, just reach out to your account manager and we probably have an option for you to make what you're looking for, your business case possible. But moving on to the next question. Trying to connect to PeopleSoft and HCM. Is there any native connections available in Qlik Cloud currently to those? PeopleSoft and HCM?
ideation.
It
Or
is
I don't see it.
possibly the ideation idea, put an idea in there, or if it's an ODBC, underlying ODBC, then perhaps the data gateway and the generic ODBC connector potentially as a workaround.
That's a good tip. Yeah,
Yeah,
that generic ODBC connector can do a lot of things, even if it hasn't
Yeah.
been thoroughly tested yet. It's good to try it
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Great. Can you change, or how can you change the sheet owner? This is a need to help with migration and when people change roles or leave the company. Any ideas on changing sheet owners?
Like private sheets.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Can't you just make
If
your
it's public,
private
does it
sheet?
matter who owns it? Yeah.
I would say if you've already shared, if you've got a shared space and your developers are in the shared space and you want to give access to your private sheet, make it public, let them make it private. I'm just throwing it out there. You know, if you're collaborating on the same app, you should be able to make your sheet public, and another developer should be able to make it private or copy the sheet at least and make it private, something like that. I don't know. Guys, what do you think? It's just an idea.
So yeah, in that scenario where somebody is leaving the company, but you want to preserve the work they've
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
I guess the question is more about if the users have already left the organizations, because if that
Sure.
is the case, yeah, if that is the case, one thing is you can't, access those private sheets. And another thing which you can try is you can ask your IT team to get those credentials back and then
Correct.
That's a
Yes.
good
and
tip.
then make it public.
Yeah.
Because if you're in an organization, you should be able to, your IT team might be able to help you out with that.
So the tenant admin still doesn't have access to those private sheets. No.
No,
No,
privates
no.
are, they
That's
don't
good
have.
to clarify that. Next one. How do you set up notifications to alert users when there are changes to a dashboard? So there are a couple
Alert would be
options
that.
there.
Yeah, you can just right click on a visualization and select alerts, and then create a new alert and configure it there. Yeah, that's a simple way to do it. I'll actually I'll give you another link where you can actually see the options.
Oh,
That's
great.
probably the best way to do it here.
Monitoring data with alerts. Great. It's monitoring, and here we get a little further down is creating alert. Fantastic. Thank you. And I'll include that link. And another question just came in. Is it planned to create users automatically with other IdPs than Microsoft's? Well, you have lots of IdP options. You could use the Qlik ID or any IdP that is available. So there's certainly other options besides Microsoft's. Does anyone else want to add something to that?
Yeah, so the create users automatically part. I think that's really dependent on the capability of the IdP, right?
I'm trying to think about capacity, the capacity model, how it's all about usage and less about the users. Isn't there a way to just allow people to come in and consume? I apologize, I'm not that familiar with it, but
Well, if you're thinking of the analyzer capacity minutes, yeah, that's a situation where you can actually, if you're
allow
setting up
anonymous
a
access.
solution like a mashup, yeah, you're just having users access directly um, the data.
All right. And last question I think we have time for today. How can I test what access a user has, specifically if they're complaining about not being able to see their dashboards? I guess if a tenant admin is getting a complaint that someone's having trouble accessing it, how can they troubleshoot that?
I would use the API, honestly. I think that would be the simplest thing to check first.
And can you suggest where we can find more information about using the API?
Yeah, like you can, if you log into the tenant and you change the URL, just going directly to the API links for the users, or if you have the user's actual ID um, from the tenant, you can put that in the URL.
Just want to thank our panel for today and hope everybody has a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining us and being with us.